Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack a stack of fascinating sources to bring you the knowledge and insights you need to stay well informed without the usual information overload. Today, we're really going on an expansive, almost wild ride through centuries and disciplines, really trying to understand the foundational elements of success and, well, failure too.
Exactly. We're embarking on a journey today through a truly diverse collection of materials. I mean, really diverse. We're spanning everything from, ancient military strategy and economic theory, all the way to modern business innovation and personal leadership.
Wow, yeah.
And our mission for you, really, is to extract the most potent nuggets of knowledge, helping you see the interconnected threads of success and failure, whether you're looking at individual endeavors or, these vast global organizations.
Right.
We'll explore how these principles, whether they come from Wall Street or Silicon Valley or even ancient Babylon, offer timeless lessons for navigating our complex, ever-changing world.
That's right. Over the next half hour or so, we're going to dig into what truly drives competitive advantage. Why some companies seem to embrace innovation while others repeatedly falter. It's fascinating. And also how leaders can build teams that aren't just effective, but, truly resilient. We'll also dissect the often surprising psychology behind our economic decisions, some really counterintuitive stuff in there, and ponder the broader societal impact of wealth creation and technological change. It's a fascinating mix. So as we begin to sift through these insights, what's the first thing that really jumps out at you? What's making you rethink something today?
What consistently strikes me again and again is how often the core principles just echo across vastly different eras and fields. It's like we're constantly rediscovering these fundamental truths about human behavior, about strategy, the nature of change, even as the specific context evolves so dramatically.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if certain traps or certain paths to success are just kind of baked into the human experience. What about you?
I think for me, it's how deeply interconnected everything is. Like you were saying, you really can't talk about business strategy without touching on leadership, right? And you can't talk about leadership without understanding human psychology and, even economics. It's all one big, messy, beautiful system.
Okay, so let's dive into crafting a winning strategy. Michael Porter, in his seminal work, Competitive Strategy, gives us a really crucial starting point. He highlights that strategy isn't just about what a company does internally. That's important, sure.
Yeah.
But it's fundamentally about relating that company to its external environment.
Right, the outside world.
Yeah. The industry structure, with its unique set of competitors, suppliers, customers, that profoundly influences the rules of the game. So the first step is to really, truly understand that battleground.
That makes perfect sense. So it's not just about being good, but being good relative to your market and understanding the specific dynamics of that market.
Yeah.
And this is where Hamilton Helmer's 7 powers comes in, giving us some, tangible examples of what that good looks like, these enduring advantages. He discusses what he calls network economies, a really powerful force where the value of a product to a customer actually increases as more people use it.
The network effect.
Yeah. Think about LinkedIn's HR solutions suite. Its immense value is directly tied to the sheer number of professionals on the platform.
Right.
The more users, the more valuable it becomes to a recruiter, which allows LinkedIn to charge significantly higher prices than competitors with smaller user bases. We've seen this before, too, like IBM mainframes and Microsoft operating systems. They built their empires on these very network effects.
Absolutely. The network acts as a kind of self-reinforcing moat around the business. It gets harder and harder for anyone else to catch up.
Yeah.
But Helmer also introduces counterpositioning, which is fascinating because it illustrates that power isn't universal. It's always relative to an incumbent.
Okay, explain that a bit more. Relative to an incumbent.
Yeah, so take In-N-Out Burger. They have counterpositioning power over McDonald's. In-N-Out deliberately chose a strategy-focused menu, high-quality, fresh ingredients that McDonald's couldn't easily imitate, because imitating it would undermine McDonald's whole existing business model, that vast, standardized global empire.
Ah, okay. So McDonald's couldn't copy In-Out without hurting itself.
Exactly. But that same counterpositioning, it offers basically no strategic edge against a similar competitor, like, say, Five Guys. They're playing a similar game. This just shows that power isn't a one-size-fits-all concept. It's always dynamic, always relative to who you're competing against. It highlights the kind of nuanced thinking required in truly strategic formulation. The insight here is that real advantage often comes from these unique market dynamics that are hard for others to replicate, not just being efficient inside.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. Because Helmer then goes on to argue that operational excellence, being really efficient, having great quality, while incredibly important, isn't strategic in the long run.
Right, that seems counterintuitive at first.
It does. But why? Because, he argues, it's often imitable. If every company in an industry can eventually achieve similar levels of efficiency or quality, well, then that operational excellence loses its competitive edge. It just becomes the cost of entry, not a real differentiator. It's like everyone learning to run faster. It doesn't give you a lead if everyone else also speeds up.
That's the core of his statics discussion point.
Mm-hmm.
In a mature, stable market, operational excellence is vital. Yeah, you need it to survive. But it's not a source of long-term competitive advantage. However, and this is crucial, he then offers a really important nuance. During the takeoff stage of a new product or market, that's when things are just getting started.
Okay.
Timely imitation becomes less likely. It's harder for competitors to copy you quickly when things are moving fast and are uncertain. And that means excellent execution can actually become highly strategic.
Ah, so timing matters hugely.
Hugely. Consider Apple's early trajectory. The Apple II, released back in '77, paired with VisiCalc, that revolutionary spreadsheet software, it just rocketed ahead. It seemed poised to own its space. That rapid, well-executed entry was absolutely key.
Right.
However, the follow-on Apple III, which came out 15 months before the IBM PC, it was, frankly, a dog. A failure. It was plagued by immature circuit board technology caused short circuits, and it was priced astronomically high, over $4,000. Meanwhile, the IBM PC came out a year later at $1,600.
Wow, big difference.
Yeah. So the failure of the Apple III, despite being an early mover, shows how even early leaders can stumble without that critical, timely execution. It just underscores that strategy isn't static. It constantly evolves with the business life cycle.
So it's about being good, yes, but also knowing when and how to be good. The context is everything. And speaking of evolving, Loftley and Martin in Playing to Win emphasize the power of simplicity and clarity in strategy. They found that clearer, simpler strategies have the best chance of winning, especially for these huge, complex organizations like P&G. I mean, 135,000 employees in 90 countries.
Yeah, that's mind-boggling complexity.
Right. And for many of them, English might be a second language. So if everyone, from the top executives down to the frontline workers, can understand the core choices, where are we going to play and how are we going to win, it just makes it easier for them to align their actions and execute with excellence every single day.
Absolutely. Simplicity empowers. It makes it easier for everyone in a vast organization to literally play from the same sheet of music,
Yeah.
regardless of their native language or cultural context. And this alignment, this shared understanding, that's precisely what becomes critical when you're assessing a new venture or even evaluating an existing one.
That's a powerful point. So building on that, when you're looking at a new business, how much do you weigh that clear, simple strategy against, say, a really innovative product, or maybe just flawless execution, especially knowing, as you said, the stage of its life cycle? What does this provoke for you in your own experiences?
Well, this constant evolution of strategy leads us right into perhaps the greatest challenge for any business, which is the imperatives of innovation. Because if your strategy isn't adapting, as Clayton Christensen brilliantly shows in The Innovator's Dilemma, even market leaders can stumble badly, especially when new disruptive technologies emerge.
Right, the classic disruption theory.
Exactly. He uses the example of Seagate. They were dominant leaders in 5.25 inches drives, the big ones back then. But they were heavily influenced, even you could say misled, by their existing powerful customers, like IBM. These big customers initially saw no use for the smaller 3.5-inch drives. Why would we need
Well,
them?
because they didn't fit the mainframes or PCs of the time.
Precisely. So Seagate effectively ignored the emerging portable computing market because it didn't fit their existing business model or their main customers' current needs. This allowed newer, nimbler companies to completely dominate what eventually became a massive market. Seagate missed it.
And this wasn't just Seagate's problem, right? You mentioned IBM. IBM, the mainframe leader, similarly ignored the mini computer, which was also a disruptive technology in its day.
Yep, same pattern.
Their existing customers didn't want it. The margins were lower than mainframes. The market was initially smaller, seemed unattractive. This created a vacuum that allowed entrants like Digital Equipment, Data General to dominate that space for years, before IBM reluctantly entered with its own mini computer line, mostly just as a defensive measure.
It's a classic example. Incumbents being misled by their customers because the new technology didn't fit their existing value networks and profit structures. They were so focused on serving their current best customers that they completely missed the next wave.
So focused on today, they miss tomorrow.
And that ties directly into Levitt's marketing myopia, which is just a timeless reminder that companies often define themselves way too narrowly, usually by their products rather than by the customer needs they fulfill.
Okay, give an example.
He famously cites how oil companies missed the natural gas revolution. Why? Because they saw themselves as oil companies, not energy companies. This made them vulnerable to innovation coming from outside their perceived domain.
They defined their sandbox too small.
Exactly. Peter Drucker asks a more fundamental question. What does the customer buy? He says the customer doesn't buy a quarter-inch drill bit. They buy a quarter-inch hole.
Right.
Or not a gas stove, but the easiest way to cook food. This shift in perspective from product to customer need is absolutely critical for long-term survival and innovation.
This resonates deeply with Pine, Peppers, and Rogers' concept of a learning relationship in Do You Want to Keep Your Customers Forever? They suggest companies need to become mass customizers and one-to-one marketers, actively eliciting information from each customer to build an ongoing, iterative connection that gets smarter over time.
Learning from every interaction.
Yeah. Retailers, for example, often have a distinct edge here. They're in a better position to see patterns in purchases, and they can customize services more readily, fostering that deeper connection by truly understanding and evolving with each customer's unique needs.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Carlota Perez talks about these major technological revolutions. She says they create techno-economic paradigms that can last about half a century. Think steam power, electricity, the internet. And there's always resistance from those who adopted and practice the old ways when a new paradigm emerges.
Of course, inertia is powerful.
It really is.
Yeah.
And this raises an important, almost provocative question she touches on. Is a bubble, like the dot-com bubble, an inevitable, albeit painful way for capitalism to install a new paradigm? Does it function to lure sufficient capital into the new infrastructure?
Does that speculative frenzy become a necessary evil, in a way? A mechanism for reorienting massive investment into new technologies, despite the eventual crash?
It's a challenging thought. Does capitalism need these manic phases to make big leaps?
That's a fascinating, almost cynical thought. Looking at modern-day innovation challenges. Elon Musk, for instance. He envisioned electric cars and space travel far more ambitious than anything big automakers like GM or Nissan had in mind at the time.
Way beyond incremental improvements.
Totally. Tesla built gorgeous two-seater roadsters for $90,000 with a 250-mile range when, as Musk handedly put it, all electric cars have sucked. This involved not just product innovation, but the monumental task of building entirely new factories capable of mass production, an investment of hundreds and hundreds of millions. It's a testament to vision, sure, but also the sheer capital required to manifest it and the guts to take on established giants.
And Satya Nadella's hit Refresh highlights how even tech giants can misjudge timing or get blindsided. Microsoft tried video on demand with something called Tiger Server long before Netflix made streaming mainstream.
Too early, maybe.
Seems like it. They even had an ATM network idea that became obsolete practically overnight with the birth of the internet. So the ability to pivot, as they later did with Windows Phone for organizations, focusing on features like Continuum, which lets a phone act like a PC, that ability is crucial. But even then, Nadella talks about the regrets, like the significant impact of layoffs on talented people during these massive strategic shifts. It's a messy human process with real consequences.
That really underscores the human cost of innovation and change. It's not just about tech and markets. And this raises an important question. In a world of constant technological flux, how do companies like Amazon, as Brad Stone describes in the Everything Store, grapple with fundamental questions like, should Amazon even be in the business of storing and distributing its products?
Questioning the very core.
Yeah. Bezos' early obsession with immediate delivery, he even pondered hiring college students on every block in Manhattan to store and deliver popular products on bicycles. It shows the extreme lengths innovators go to. It also hints at the deep rethinking of basic business models that disruption constantly demands.
Exactly. It's not just about refining existing processes. Sometimes it's about asking if the core assumptions of the business are still valid, or if they need to be completely thrown out and rebuilt.
So as you process these insights, how does this shape your view of innovation? Are you more inclined to ride the wave of the new, maybe even help create it? or to transform an existing market with a really deep customer-centric focus. Often, I guess, the most profound changes blend both, but the emphasis can truly make all the difference for a company's longevity.
Moving from the challenges of innovation, let's look at what happens when giants stumble. And often, it's due to failures in corporate governance and ethics. The Enron saga, detailed in The Smartest Guys in the Room, provides just a stark, chilling lesson in the perils of unchecked power and a toxic culture.
Yeah, Enron is the classic case study, isn't it?
It really is. The traders' insular culture was described as having a dangerous edge. They were self-righteous, unable to see beyond their own value system. Top management, particularly Jeffrey Skilling, failed to keep them in check, essentially allowed them to run amok. You had John Arnold, a superstar trader, who could lose and gain $200 million in a month, yet still be deemed cool.
Wow, that's a culture problem right there.
Absolutely. It shows a complete breakdown of internal controls, ethical oversight, and this dangerous glorification of risky behavior.
What's truly fascinating, though, is that even when Ken Lay, the CEO, knew about Rebecca Mark's aggressive deal-making, building power plants in places like India, sometimes recklessly, Skillen admitted later it was politically impossible for him to stop her, even though he later blamed her for some of the mess.
The internal politics trumped sound business judgment.
Exactly. So it wasn't just about individual ethics, but a systemic failure, where internal politics, unchecked power dynamics, and this reluctance to challenge strong personalities just overrode sound judgment and financial prudence. The truth, in a way, was secondary to the political reality inside Enron. It shows how a flawed culture can truly blind leadership.
And James Stewart's Den of Thieves gives us another angle on ethical breaches. It details Michael Milken's dealings with Ivan Boesky, the insider trading scandals of the 1980s. The book highlights the destruction of records, the compelled testimony of witnesses who didn't exactly volunteer information, and the lack of a really strong corroborating witness for some key claims. All of this just underscores the immense challenges in prosecuting complex financial crimes.
Makes it hard to get convictions stick.
Very hard. Even the SEC's chief of enforcement at the time, Gary Lynch, was reportedly demoralized by press criticism of the Boesky settlement. It shows the public pressure and the difficulty in asserting accountability when the evidence is so carefully obscured or complex.
Okay, so shifting gears slightly. What about the profit motive versus a broader purpose? Built to Last challenges the common myth that the most successful companies exist primarily to maximize profits.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It is. Paradoxically, they found that visionary companies, the ones guided by a core ideology beyond just making money, they often make more money over the long term than the purely profit-driven ones. So it shifts the focus from short-term gains to a broader purpose, suggesting that purpose can be a powerful engine for sustained financial success and a more enduring competitive advantage.
And yet,
Yeah.
Seth Godin in Purple Cow observed something else. He says some businesses, once they become really successful, get too profitable to worry about the very purple cow, the remarkability, the innovation that got them there in the first place.
They get complacent.
Yeah. He cynically notes that dumbing down his store for the masses was a way to get rich in a hurry. It appeals directly to shareholders who want immediate returns, not necessarily long-term remarkability. And Scott Galloway in The Four describes Amazon's strategy with this powerful analogy. He says, being an investor in Amazon is growing up in Mitt Romney's house.
Yeah.
You're just not going to get access to heroin profits.
Huh. That's quite an image.
It is. Amazon consistently downplays profits, doesn't pay dividends. Instead, it reinforces this vision of relentless growth and world domination to justify market adoration, even while burning through cash. It's a grand narrative that prioritizes long-term market dominance over any short-term payouts.
Which raises a really important question. Are shareholders always aligned with that kind of long-term vision? Or do short-term profit pressures create a dangerous dynamic for companies trying to innovate and adapt? I mean, look at Walmart shedding $20 billion in market value just for announcing a strategic shift towards e-commerce investment.
Yeah, the market can be incredibly short-sighted.
And Phil Knight in Shoe Dog talks about experiencing this firsthand with bankers early on. Bankers like Bob Wallace who fetishized equity and poo-pooed growth. Made life incredibly difficult for entrepreneurs focused on expansion rather than immediate profitability.
Right, the classic tension between growth and profit. Now, on systemic issues and accountability, John Brooks in Business Adventures recounts the GE price-fixing affair from the 1960s, a huge scandal where moral responsibility was, as he puts it, hopelessly muddied by a struggle to communicate.
Communication breakdown leading to ethical lapse.
It seems so.
Yeah.
The public relations team had to choose between representing GE as a fool or a knave. Did they not know, or were they complicit? And Brooks concludes the real truth might very likely never be known. It points to these deep-seated organizational communication issues where subordinates and superiors seemingly spoke past each other, intentionally or not, about illegal activities, allowing for that plausible deniability that just muddied accountability.
And bringing this right up to date, Shoshana Zuboff's The Age of Surveillance Capitalism offers a really critical contemporary lens. She argues that the privatization of our data for corporate profits, rather than for the common good, creates entirely new forms of inequality.
Yeah, the whole data economy debate.
Exactly. She provocatively suggests that Amazon, whose AI capabilities are built with our data, she says Amazon should be required to pay that fee to us.
It's not just about company profit anymore. It's about the very source of value and who benefits from the vast amounts of data we all collectively generate in the digital age. It fundamentally challenges the assumption of who owns the value created in this new economy. It really forces us to consider whether the current economic model adequately compensates for the value extracted from our digital lives, and if the stories companies tell about wealth creation truly reflect the broader contribution and dependencies.
So as you look at corporate giants today, how much do you weigh their financial success against their ethical conduct, their long-term vision versus short-term pressures, their societal impact? It's an increasingly complex balance, isn't it? Especially as technology reshapes the very definition of value.
Okay, let's shift our focus now to the art of leadership itself. Jocko Willink and Leif Babin's extreme ownership, coming from a military background, assert something powerful, that leaders have nothing to prove but everything to prove.
Explain that paradox.
Well, rank confers authority, sure, but true leadership requires earning respect. And you do that by consistently demonstrating good judgment, remaining calm under pressure, making the right decisions when it matters most. It's all about your actions, not just your position or title. You have to constantly prove your worthiness to lead.
That connects beautifully with Peter F. Drucker's Managing Oneself, where he argues that organizations are no longer built on force, but on trust. And trust means understanding one another. You don't necessarily have to like each other, he says, but you need that understanding.
The understanding builds the trust.
Exactly. And Drucker, in What Makes an Effective Executive, tells us that effective executives are fundamentally doers. They concentrate on just one or two urgent tasks at a time. Focus is key. And crucially, they always ask, what is right for the enterprise? Not what's right for me or my department, but the whole organization. That single-minded focus on the organization's best interest rather than personal gain is paramount.
And Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence in What Makes a Leader reinforces this from a different angle. He found that emotional intelligence, things like self-awareness, empathy, social skills, is twice as important as technical skills or IQ for outstanding performance, especially at the highest levels.
Twice as important. That's significant.
It really is, and specifically self-regulation, the ability to master your emotions, to show reflection and thoughtfulness instead of impulsive outbursts, that's key. What's even more encouraging, he found, is that emotional intelligence, thankfully, can be learned, and it tends to increase with age and experience. This means leadership isn't just some innate trait you're born with. It's a skill or set of skills that can be cultivated and honed over time.
Absolutely. It suggests a clear path to improvement for anyone in or aspiring to a leadership role. That's empowering. And we talked about simplicity and strategy. Well, simplicity and clarity in communication are just as critical for leaders. Guy Kawasaki in Art of the Start 2.0 states his goal very simply. Simple and pure. I want to make entrepreneurship easier for you. He understands the power of making complex ideas accessible and digestible.
Cutting through the jargon.
Right. Similarly, Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous I Have a Dream speech. As described in Adam Grant's originals, it wasn't actually written from scratch right before he gave it. He assembled it from successful passages from his own previous sermons, sections from other preachers' work he admired, anecdotes, Bible verses, lines from favorite poets.
Interesting, like building blocks.
Exactly. This flexibility and authenticity, drawing on things that resonated with him and his audiences before, combined with that crystal clear, resonant messaging, made it incredibly impactful. He wasn't afraid to adapt and iterate to connect deeply.
And Simon Sinek in Start With Why points out a real irony. Companies often do extensive customer research trying to appear authentic, but Sinek says you can't ask others what you have to do to be authentic.
Ah, good point.
Authenticity, he argues, has to come from within a leader and an organization. It can't be engineered from external input. It has to be genuinely felt and expressed to be believable.
Okay, now let's look at some truly diverse leadership styles. The good, the bad, and the downright controversial. Consider Robert Moses, as depicted in Robert Cara's monumental biography, The Power Broker. Moses was a master builder, reshaping New York with highways, bridges, parks, incredible achievements. But he famously antagonized people, dismissed opposition loftily, had a habit of thumbing his nose at critics,
Um,
literally.
a force of nature, but abrasive.
Extremely. His approach was all about raw power and control, often at the expense of public opinion or collaboration. Caro writes he even granted interviews just for the pleasure of showing he could ignore suggestions he didn't like.
Wow. Okay, then there's John D. Rockefeller Sr. in Titan. He similarly ignored public opinion for years, maybe decades. There's a story where Dr. Strong tried to persuade Rockefeller to fund a university, partly to sanitize his reputation.
Clean up his image a bit.
Right.
Okay.
But it backfired completely.
Yeah.
Rockefeller apparently resented any references to his infamy and felt absolutely no need to cleanse his image. This highlights a powerful, if highly controversial, leadership style where external perception is deliberately, almost defiantly ignored, especially when a leader believes they are in the right and are pursuing their own vision. It's a stark contrast to modern notions of PR and public image management.
Definitely wouldn't fly today, I don't think. Then you have someone like Steve Jobs. According to Walter Isaacson's biography, Jobs was notoriously impossible to work with for some people, introducing tension, politics, and hassles into the workplace. Yet, he also had this incredible charisma and corporate clout to make people believe they could make a dent in the universe.
The famous reality distortion field.
Exactly. He was energized by competition, even betting $5,000 that the Mac team would ship before the Lisa team. It shows his intensity and belief. His demanding nature, while incredibly difficult for many, was often inseparable from his ability to inspire that groundbreaking work that truly changed the world.
These examples really illustrate the immense spectrum of leadership styles and how deeply personal it can be, even within highly structured environments. There just isn't one perfect mold.
So, as you reflect on these very different leaders, Robert Moses, Rockefeller, Steve Jobs, what qualities do you value most in a leader? Is it their overarching vision, their ability to communicate with crystal clarity, their emotional intelligence in managing themselves and others, or maybe sometimes is their sheer unyielding force of will? Each offers a unique path, doesn't it? And the combination that works best often depends entirely on the context and the challenge at hand.
Moving from individual leadership now to team dynamics. This is crucial. The Discipline of Teams by Katzenbach and Smith makes a really important distinction. They differentiate between effective groups and true high-performing teams. It's not the same thing.
Okay, what's the difference?
True team wisdom, they argue, is about applying the right discipline at the right time. That includes establishing a clear performance purpose, why are we here? Agreeing on specific outcome-based goals, what do we need to achieve? And finding ways to hold one another mutually accountable. That's the kicker. Mutual accountability. This is hard work. It's often easier, more comfortable to just remain an effective group than to commit to the rigorous demands and sometimes the necessary conflict of a true team.
That mutual accountability part sounds key and hard. Kim Scott, in Radical Candor, emphasizes building a culture of listening and clarifying thoughts and ideas. She suggests the boss should act as the editor, not the author, meaning nurturing those fragile, barely formed thoughts that people bring forward, much like Steve Jobs apparently did when shaping new product ideas.
Helping ideas grow, not just imposing your own.
Exactly. She suggests practical things, like projecting notes in meetings and actively encouraging people to correct them on the spot. It shows you're genuinely listening and engaged, fosters transparency, and ensures everyone feels heard and understood, and it makes the ideas stronger, not weaker, through that collective refinement.
Patrick Lencioni, in The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, gives us a reality check. He says, this stuff won't stick unless we understand how to apply it completely. It requires ongoing effort. Repetitive discussions, revisiting the principles, helps changes in leadership and team dynamics truly take hold, become habit. He also advocates for encouraging constructive conflict in staff meetings.
Conflict, that sounds risky.
Constructive conflict. Debating ideas, challenging assumptions respectfully. Lencioni argues it can prevent meetings from being boring and instead make them vibrant forums for critical problem solving. Get the real issues on the table. It's also about taking responsibility. The new one-minute manager describes a scenario where a leader takes responsibility if a goal isn't clear to everyone. By owning communication gaps, the leader fosters fairness and trust.
Okay, that makes sense. Shifting to culture. Clayton Christensen in How Will You Measure Your Life explains something interesting. He says a strong company culture can be a tremendous blessing, a real asset, but if the environment changes substantially, that very strength, that ingrained way of doing things, can become a rigid barrier to necessary change.
The culture that made you successful can prevent future success.
Exactly. He illuminates how culture is formed through repetition. You define a recurring problem, you find a solution that works, and then you solve it that way repeatedly until it becomes instinctive, automatic, the way we do things around here. This institutionalizes behavior, for better or worse, and it takes deliberate, conscious effort to reshape it when needed.
And Peter Drucker, again, in HBR's 10 must-reads on managing yourself, highlights the importance of values alignment. For an individual to be truly effective in an organization, their personal values must be compatible with the organization's values. They don't need to be identical, he says, but close enough to coexist without constant friction.
Otherwise, you get burnout or disengagement.
Right. Conflict and ultimately ineffectiveness arises when a person's values don't align with what they do well or what the organization stands for. Managing oneself also means taking responsibility for relationships, understanding your coworkers' strengths, their performance modes, their values. Because, as Drucker puts it so well, other people are as much individuals as you yourself are. That basic empathy and understanding are foundational for collaboration.
This brings us to the crucial shift away from traditional command and control. Stanley McChrystal's team of teams, drawing on his military experience fighting adaptive networks, critiques the old scientific management model with its rigid and inflexible standards and clear-cut, definite instructions given down the chain.
The Taylorism model.
Yeah. McChrystal argues that even in seemingly mechanical tasks, some degree of innovation and creative thinking is beneficial, especially for jobs that can't be easily automated. You need people thinking. Yet, the alarming reality he cites is that only about 20% of workers today actually feel empowered in their jobs. This highlights a persistent gap between what we know works empowerment, trust, and the actual implementation in many organizations.
Stephen Covey, in The 7 Habits, describes a crucial progression for individuals and teams, moving from dependence, relying on others, to independence, self-reliance, before you can achieve effective interdependence, collaboration. He famously states, private victory precedes public victory. You have to get your own act together first.
Master yourself before you can effectively work with others.
Exactly. You can't talk your way out of problems you behave yourself into.
Eh.
This self-mastery, taking responsibility for your own actions and habits, is foundational for building good relationships and for creating effective win-win agreements where mutual understanding and clear expectations are set up front. It all starts with personal integrity.
And speaking of different models, Sam Walton, in Made in America, firmly believed Walmart didn't need unions. He argued they were divisive and broke down direct communication between management and associates, making it harder to serve customers effectively.
A controversial stance, but core to his philosophy.
Absolutely. Instead, he championed things like profit sharing, incentive bonuses, discount stock purchase plans, and just a genuine effort to involve the associates in the business, make them partners. This fostered a strong internal partnership and a unique, famously anti-union culture that focused on shared success and direct empowerment.
He saw a direct line from employee engagement and shared incentives straight to better customer service and market competitiveness, effectively creating a powerful, unified culture aimed at winning in the marketplace.
So, as you reflect on these insights about teams and culture, how much do you think about the culture and values of the teams and organizations you're part of? Is it something you consciously consider? How do you personally contribute to, or maybe actively seek out, environments that prioritize trust and empowerment over rigid control? It's not just about what you do, is it? But how you relate and truly belong within that collective.
Okay, let's delve now into the entrepreneurial mindset itself. Drive, vision, resilience. Built to Last again offers a counter-narrative here. It dispels the myth of the far-seeing entrepreneur founding a company based on a single, brilliant, visionary product idea right from the start.
The light bulb moment myth.
Exactly. Instead, they found that many visionary companies like HP, Sony, Walmart, they often had competitors with a head start. They didn't necessarily invent the category. They simply did it better and adapted more effectively over time. It was more about relentless refinement and execution than relying on that singular initial stroke of genius.
Howard Schultz's journey with Starbucks, detailed in Pour Your Heart Into It, beautifully illustrates this relentless drive combined with a vision. He left a comfortable $75,000 a year job with prestige to join a tiny outfit with just 5 coffee stores in Seattle.
Wow, that's a leap of faith.
Huge leap. His mother was genuinely concerned, saying, "Don't give it up for a small company nobody's ever heard of." Classic parental concern. But he had perceived the romantic appeal of coffee by the cup during a trip to Italy. He saw something others didn't, and he spent 3 years meticulously planning how to translate that experience, that feeling, into an American context. He quotes Peter Drucker, "Luck is the residue of design. It wasn't random chance, it was meticulous planning meeting this perceived, deeply felt opportunity."
That design part is key. He engineered his luck. And Elon Musk exemplifies this relentless pursuit of vision on an almost unimaginable scale. Ashley Vance, in his biography, describes Musk as an inventor, a celebrity businessman, an industrialist, much more like Thomas Edison than Howard Hughes, he argues, capable of turning big ideas into big products through sheer force of will and execution.
He definitely gets things done.
He does. And he instills extreme urgency. Vance tells how Musk would tell SpaceX employees that everything we did was a function of our burn rate, and that we were burning through $100,000 per day. That creates focus. He'd apparently rent a plane for $90,000 just to save a workday if needed, but he also wouldn't flinch at making people find small purchases cheaper if possible. This extreme focus on efficiency and speed, driven by the burn rate, is a hallmark of his high-stakes approach.
And Jeff Bezos, back at Amazon, described in the Everything Store, showed a similar obsessive focus, particularly on immediate delivery. Remember the college students on bicycles idea?
Yes, storing products in their apartments.
It sounds crazy, but this kind of extreme, almost fantastical thinking about the customer experience often defines a visionary entrepreneur. This extreme focus, however, the book notes, could also make Amazon a deeply unhappy place to work at times, due to things like flat stock prices for periods, strict limits on raises, and just an unrelenting pace. The entrepreneurial drive, it seems, often comes with significant human costs, both for the entrepreneur and those around them.
And when it comes to embracing risk and learning from setbacks, that's core to entrepreneurship. Ben Horowitz, in The Hard Thing About Hard Things, describes this moment contemplating a potential deal with data return and realizing some things are much easier to see in others than in yourself.
Holding up a mirror.
Exactly. He looked at data return and could see LoudCloud's future, and it was not pretty. His own company's potential future. This led him to confront the worst thing that could happen: bankruptcy, losing everyone's money, ruining his reputation. This moment of brutal honesty, seeing his own company's potential pitfalls reflected in another, was a critical turning point that required immense resilience to face and act upon.
That takes guts. And this is where it gets really powerful for me. Horowitz also famously used a specific agenda item in his staff meetings. The item was, "What are we not doing?"
Ooh, interesting question.
Isn't it? Sometimes, he observed, the things you're not doing are the things you should actually be focused on. This kind of critical self-reflection, actively seeking out blind spots or neglected areas, is absolutely essential for entrepreneurs, especially when navigating complex and challenging environments. It's about being proactive and identifying potential future problems or opportunities before they become crises.
It's a really powerful method for counteracting that organizational inertia we talked about, and complacency, forcing a team to look beyond the immediate fires to the things being neglected.
So as you consider these stories of relentless drive, vision, and facing hard truths, what impossible idea might you be quietly working on or thinking about? And how do you balance that grand vision and relentless drive with the self-awareness and the humility needed to learn? Learn from both your own experiences and, maybe just as importantly, from others' experiences too. The entrepreneurial journey seems to be as much about that internal fortitude and resilience as it is about external execution.
Okay, let's shift now to the broader economic fabric that underlies all this. Paul Krugman's essay, "A Country is Not a Company," challenges a really common misconception among business executives. They often believe that a country receiving billions in foreign investment will necessarily run trade surpluses. Makes intuitive sense, right? Money coming in.
Yeah, seems logical.
But economists, Krugman notes, would argue the opposite. That country will necessarily run large trade deficits, because that foreign investment needs to be balanced by an inflow of real goods and services from abroad. The accounting has to balance. This just highlights a fundamental difference in perspective, a business leader's ability to spot opportunities in their own companies, doesn't automatically translate to running a national economy. The rules, the dynamics, the scale are just profoundly different.
That might sound a bit academic, but it profoundly changes how we understand things like trade debates or economic downturns. And John Maynard Keynes, back in the 1930s with the general theory of employment, interest, and money, he aimed his book squarely at fellow economists, urging them to re-examine critically certain of their basic assumptions.
Challenging the classical view.
Exactly. He highlighted complexities, like the fact that labor often stipulates a minimum money wage, not necessarily a minimum real wage, adjusted for inflation, and the crucial fact that employment levels are a function of expected future consumption and investment, what businesses think will happen.
Animal spirits.
Right. Keynes showed that people and businesses aren't just reacting to current reality or pure logic. They're reacting to their perceptions of value and, crucially, what they expect to happen next. So if businesses expect less consumer spending, they hire less, which then causes less spending. A self-fulfilling prophecy. It means psychology, not just pure math, drives markets. And that matters profoundly for economic policy.
And this leads us directly into the field of behavioral economics, which fundamentally challenges those traditional rational actor assumptions. Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein in Nudge introduced this idea of asymmetric paternalism, which basically means designing systems or choices to help the least sophisticated people make better decisions while minimizing harm or restriction for everyone else.
Like default options for retirement savings.
Exactly. And they point out this deep irony that traditional economists often dismiss findings from psychology experiments because the experiments are low stakes or don't have enough practice trials. Yet, in life's biggest decisions, choosing a career, getting married, deciding on grad school, the stakes are incredibly high and there are no practice trials.
Good point. You don't get a do-over on getting married.
Right. It shows a fundamental disconnect between tidy theoretical economic models and the messy reality of human decision-making where high stakes and inexperience are the norm.
This is where Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow becomes so incredibly vital. Everyone should read this book. He reveals how our brains work with two systems. System 1 is fast, intuitive, emotional. System 2 is slow, deliberate, logical. But System 2 is often lazy, as he puts it. It defaults to the easy, intuitive, and often incorrect answers provided by System 1.
We take mental shortcuts.
Constantly. We fall prey to overconfidence. Kahneman shows our confidence often depends on the coherence of the story we tell ourselves, not the actual quantity or quality of the evidence supporting it. We get hit by framing effects. Saying surgery has a 90% survival rate feels very different from saying it has a 10% mortality rate, even though it's the same fact, affects choices and base rate neglect. We think a meek, tidy person described to us is more likely a librarian than a farmer, even though there are vastly more farmers than librarians. We ignore the statistical base rate. Our brains are wired for these shortcuts, and they often lead us astray in economic choices, making us, well, predictably irrational.
And Dan Ariely's Predictably Irrational further elaborates on these cognitive biases. He talks about the endowment effect. We value things more simply because we own them. Harder to sell something than you'd pay to buy it. Loss aversion, we feel the pain of a loss much more acutely, maybe twice as much, as the pleasure of an equivalent gain. Makes us risk-averse. And status quo bias, just a general preference for things to stay the same, even when change might be beneficial. We stick with the default. All of these subtly but powerfully influence our economic decisions in ways we might not consciously understand or even acknowledge, often leading us to make choices that aren't really in our best long-term interest.
It's humbling, really. So as you think about these hidden forces, when you make big financial or life decisions, how aware are you of these underlying biases and assumptions? Do you actively try to challenge the easy narrative your brain might create? Or do you tend to rely on your gut instinct, which, as we've just learned, might be predictably irrational itself?
Okay, let's apply this psychological lens now to navigating financial markets. Howard Marks, in The Most Important Thing Eliminated, offers just profound wisdom here. He argues that the necessary condition for the existence of bargains is that perception has to be considerably worse than reality.
Buying when there's blood in the streets.
Essentially, yes. He describes how investor psychology causes the market pendulum to swing violently between fear and greed, way too far in both directions. And these swings create opportunities for astute, contrarian investors who can see past the immediate sentiment. True superior investment results, Marx insists, come from superior insight. You have to have an edge. That means learning things others don't, seeing things differently, or analyzing situations better, more rationally than the emotional crowd. It's about being thoughtfully contrarian, not just contrarian for the sake of being different.
And Marx really emphasizes risk control. It seems central to his philosophy. He says it's at the core of defensive investing, which focuses more on not doing the wrong thing, avoiding big losses, rather than solely maximizing returns in good times.
Protecting the downside.
Exactly. This includes building a generous margin for error into your investments. By insisting on favorable terms, buying below intrinsic value, it's about protecting against the inevitable downside. Understanding that the future is fundamentally uncertain and building resilience into your portfolio so you can weather the inevitable storms. Survive to play another day.
And Michael Burry, famously depicted in The Big Short, fundamentally challenged the conventional notion of risk. The academic idea that risk is just volatility, how much prices fluctuate.
Right, standard deviation, beta.
Yeah. For Burry, real risk was stupid investment decisions. Poor analysis, overpaying. He saw the ability to buy an asset for, say, 40 cents that he believed was truly worth $1. He saw that as an opportunity, not risk. This is a profound redefinition of risk that goes against a lot of conventional market wisdom, where volatility is often used as a simple, maybe lazy proxy for risk. Burry looked deeper at the underlying value and the potential for permanent capital loss, not just temporary fluctuations.
Looking at the investment landscape and the players in it, Benjamin Graham, the father of value investing. His book, The Intelligent Investor, advises aggressive investors, those trying to beat the market, to first ensure their results won't be worse than the market before aiming for better. First, do no harm to your capital.
Sounds like the defensive investing Marx talks about.
Very much so. Graham warns that virtues, if channeled in the wrong directions, become indistinguishable from handicaps. Intelligence misapplied can be dangerous. He writes he would have been disappointed, though surely not surprised, by investment banking firms bringing companies like Infospace public during the dot-com boom, which soared and then crashed spectacularly, or by commercial banks that chronically kept supporting unsound expansions like Enron and WorldCom right up until they collapsed. It illustrates a systemic failure, often repeated, of due diligence and prudent capital allocation by supposedly sophisticated players.
And The Big Short vividly details the gold mine that was the market for credit default swaps, CDS, on subprime mortgage bonds leading up to 2008. To put it simply, these CDSs were basically insurance policies against those incredibly risky mortgage bonds failing. Greg Lippman, a trader featured in the book, effectively shorted $10 billion worth of these bonds by buying CDSs. But it cost him $100 million a year in premiums just waiting for the collapse, with no end in sight initially. Imagine that pressure.
Paying out millions, hoping for a disaster.
Exactly. Investors who bought these swaps suspected the market was rigged by Wall Street to keep the bonds afloat, or they simply wearied of paying insurance premiums to bet against bonds that never seemed to move. The psychological toll was immense. This just highlights the immense pressure, the deep conviction required, the psychological toll of being early and contrarian, and the incredibly complex interplay of financial instruments that ultimately led to the 2008 financial crisis.
So as you reflect on these lessons from the market trenches, how do you define risk in your own life, especially when it comes to financial decisions? Where do you draw the line? Are you naturally a defensive investor, focused first on capital preservation? Or more aggressive, chasing higher returns? And crucially, how do you try to discern true value amidst all the market noise and herd mentality, especially when the prevailing narratives are so compelling and often ultimately misleading?
Okay, let's broaden our lens one last time to the wider impact of wealth and value on society itself. The Richest Man in Babylon, that classic collection of parables, offers timeless, simple wisdom. Its most famous lesson: a part of all you earn is yours to keep. Pay yourself first.
The foundation of saving.
Absolutely. It advocates for cultivating one's powers, studying, becoming wiser, as part of the 7 cures for a lean purse. It's not just about money, but self-improvement. It also warns against foolish sentiments of obligation when it comes to safeguarding one's treasure, emphasizing personal responsibility and prudence in managing wealth for the long term, perhaps even against social pressures.
The Millionaire Next Door similarly challenges common stereotypes about wealth in modern times. It reveals that the most prodigious accumulators of wealth, the people with high net worth relative to their income, are often incredibly frugal, and their spouses are often even more so. It really counters that flashy, high-consumption image of the rich.
Living below your means.
Consistently. High income combined with great defense, that frugality is what leads to high net worth over time. The book also notes something interesting about economic outpatient care, parents subsidizing their adult children. It suggests this can actually hinder the children's ability to learn to make ends meet themselves, even if they have decent salaries. demonstrating a counterintuitive dynamic in wealth accumulation. Sometimes enabling can actually disempower financial independence.
Milton Friedman, in Capitalism and Freedom, points out empirical evidence, even back then, of underinvestment in human capital, meaning the rate of return on training and education was often much higher than the return on physical capital, like machinery. This suggests a profound societal imbalance and a missed opportunity. Investing in people yields greater returns for both individuals and society as a whole than merely investing in machines. Yet we often prioritize the latter, both in private investment and public policy.
Peter F. Drucker, looking at the role of business in society, he argued presciently that managers are increasingly expected to take a leadership role in major social problems, with the quality of life becoming the business of business, a broader responsibility.
Beyond just shareholder value.
Right. Profit, Drucker clarifies, is not the objective in itself. It's a requirement. It's necessary to cover costs, risks, and ensure the survival of the enterprise, which then allows other, broader objectives serving customers, contributing to society, providing good jobs to be attained. This reframes profit as a vital means to an end, not the ultimate end itself, for a responsible enterprise.
Friedrich Hayek, in The Road to Serfdom, writing amidst concerns about rising totalitarianism, discussed the danger of state control over monopolies. He argued for a superior political power which can hold the economic interests in check, rather than creating an irresponsible international economic authority. He believed this power should restrain the monopolies or concentrated interests from action which will damage others, emphasizing a need for checks and balances that transcend purely national economic interests, safeguarding against concentrations of power, whether corporate or governmental.
And Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia and Let My People Go Surfing, offers very concrete policy suggestions for creating a sustainable society. Real radical ideas for the time, like taxing polluters heavily, ending subsidies for wasteful industries like oil and industrial agriculture, levying taxes on the use of non-renewable resources, and maybe even reducing income taxes to shift the burden. This directly challenges the conventional economic model, advocating for systemic changes to promote environmental and social good, moving way beyond just voluntary corporate social responsibility to actual structural economic reform.
And Mariana Mazzucato's value of everything brings this right up to the present day. She fundamentally questions the stories businesses tell about being wealth-creating. Stories often used, she argues, to justify inequalities of wealth and income. She argues that companies like IBM and Microsoft, while achieving economies of scale, also privatize data derived from public investments or collective activity, using it for corporate profits rather than the common good, leading to skewed access to the profits generated.
Like the Amazon example again.
Exactly. She provocatively suggests that Amazon, whose AI capabilities are built with our data, should be required to pay that fee to us, especially given that much of the underlying infrastructure, like the internet itself, was publicly financed initially. This profoundly reframes the whole source of value in the digital economy and who truly deserves to benefit from it, who is really creating the value.
Bringing it right back down to personal values and purpose, Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged gives us this powerful, maybe unsettling scene where the character Philip claims he has no selfish interest in collecting money for a cause, but the protagonist, Reardon, feels a sudden loathing. Not because the words were hypocrisy, but because they were true. Philip meant them.
That's a chilling line. The sincerity is the problem.
Exactly. It highlights the often uncomfortable conflict between stated values and true motivations and the complex perception of virtue versus genuine ethical action. It really makes you question what people truly mean by their altruistic claims.
And finally, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits encourages us to identify our own center. What truly guides our life? Is it spouse-centered, money-centered, work-centered, possession-centered? He urges us to consciously shift to a principle-centered life based on timeless values like integrity, fairness, service. This principle center, he argues, provides true security, guidance, wisdom, and power, unlike the shifting sands of other centers. He advocates for writing personal and family mission statements to guide decisions based on these correct principles, providing a clear internal compass in a complex and often confusing world.
So as you reflect on this final section, thinking about wealth, society, values, what are the stories you tell, maybe just to yourself, about wealth and value creation? How do your personal values align or maybe sometimes conflict with your economic decisions? And ultimately, what kind of society do you truly wish to see built through your own choices and contributions, large or small? These questions are really at the heart of how we navigate our shared future, individually and collectively. Wow. What an incredible deep dive today into the engines of ambition, the pitfalls of power, the subtleties of strategy, and the profound impact of our choices, both individual and collective. We've really seen how competitive advantage is built and lost, how leadership demands both personal integrity and sharp strategic acumen, and how economic realities are shaped not just by grand theories, but by subtle, often irrational human biases. It's truly a tapestry of interconnected ideas.
Absolutely. And just to quickly recap some of the key takeaways we pulled from our courses today. First, strategy is dynamic and deeply contextual. Remember that. Always be ready to adapt and innovate. Recognize that what works at one stage might fail miserably at another. Don't be misled by your current customers if disruptive innovations are lurking on the horizon. The real power lies in understanding why certain advantages are defensible in your specific context, not just what they are.
Right. And second, leadership is earned through action and integrity. It's not just the title. Trust, not just authority, defines effective leadership. Cultivating emotional intelligence, ensuring clarity in communication, truly empowering teams. These are paramount. And remember, leadership is a skill that can be developed over time.
Third, economics is profoundly human. We are not perfectly rational calculators. Our decisions are influenced by deep-seated psychological patterns and biases. Understanding these can help us make better choices both personally and societally, mostly by challenging our intuitive shortcuts and easy assumptions.
And finally, values matter most. This came through again and again, whether in business, leadership, or personal finance, having a clear core ideology, a purpose beyond mere profit. That can lead to more profound and sustainable success and contribute to a more equitable and resilient future for everyone.
We've seen how often luck is the residue of design, as Howard Schultz reminds us. Success isn't usually accidental, and how even some of the most influential thinkers, like Benjamin Franklin, confess their rambling digressions and errata of life. Perfection isn't the goal. So as you move forward, considering these intricate connections between strategy, human behavior, and the pursuit of value, maybe ask yourself this. In a world where so much is built on stories, the stories companies tell, the stories leaders tell, the stories we tell ourselves, what is the true story you are living and contributing to? And how will you measure its lasting impact long after the immediate wins and losses fade?